What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday. First and foremost, did everybody survive Momo this week? This is very dangerous, and it's like a widespread crisis. We're in crisis mode. That's all I'm hearing about at home. And it doesn't matter how many explanations I give as to why it's nothing to be worried about. It's a big deal. So I hope that your families all survive Momo as well. So we do actually have a few house cleaning duties to do today. First of all, the fans hobby Overlord. There was some confusion about what I meant by size. So it scales very well with their power baser. I've seen pictures. I don't have power baser, but it scales very well. I also think that the size of Overlord feels appropriate. However, you can make the argument that both power baser and Overlord aren't quite masterpiece scale. They're a bit on the smaller side. They work fine for my sensibilities. I hope that they work fine for yours if there's something that you're interested in, but the argument can be made. Whereas I feel like the Overlord from MMC is more accurate in terms of the scale it's trying to fulfill. A lot of comparisons have been asked to be made about the two, and the truth is I just feel like they're apples and oranges. Next, the DX9 Henry. A lot of people seem to know where I was coming from with that. I did get one gentleman that said in the comments, he has a backpack, you complain about the backpack. The backpack compresses, you complain it's too skinny. And I understand where he's coming from with that, but the truth is that there is a fine balance that can be struck. Many companies have struck it before. Many designers have struck it before. I think that this one doesn't do it quite as well. This one ends up looking awkward. I also simultaneously think they do a pretty good job in regards to the skinniness of breakdown. Like, I think that one works very well, whereas this one I feel like maybe is a little too tight. However, I say that to say this. I think that in the same regard, you could see that Henry could be very much more beneficial to the combine mode because of his compactness. People have been concerned as to whether or not the robot cues of Henry are discouraging me from the combine mode of their Minosaur. It doesn't one bit, not one iota. And they've recently come out and said it's even going to be slightly taller. I think they said 50 centimeters, which is like 19 and a half. So I think that it's important to realize that this Minosaur still looks like it's going to be on target. It's just the bot modes are not for me at this point. If they're for you, that's great. And lastly, the fans toys discussion, part 1 of 2. Some interesting responses to that. I advise anyone to go through the comments and look through it. Let me say this as a disclaimer. Those dummies discussions, they're not declarative statements. It doesn't mean that what we say is God's gospel. It just means that this is a candid, pretty much, conversation that I am allowing everyone to be privy to. So this is how people talk. They're not talking to you. We're talking to each other, and you're able to listen. But it's been very interesting to watch the responses, and I think a lot of this comes down to intention, and we might circle back to that in a sit-down Saturday in the future, because intention has become ever so important to me in regards to display. As have these dummies conversations, which I'm really enjoying, and it seems like most of you are enjoying as well, and I'm glad to hear that, because they're a lot of fun to put together. A lot of work, but a lot of fun. And that pretty much does it for this past week, I think. Now let's get into this week's discussion, and I want to be crystal clear. I don't know what I'm talking about. I have no hardcore evidence to support what I'm saying. A lot of times when I do these types of videos, I know what the truth is, but I don't feel as comfortable just putting it out there. My goal, rather, is to lay down the breadcrumbs and allow you to see what the truth is. This one, I don't know. This one is a lot of hunches. I'm going to give you the information that I've been looking at. I'm going to give you the perspective that I've been seeing, and I'm going to allow you to make your own choices, as I always do. And let me also say this, ultimately, it doesn't matter. We're still getting the products, and most of us, that's what we care about. A lot of these sit-down Saturdays are more for people that want to talk more about it, more about the culture of third party and the ins and outs and the nooks and crannies. And that's the itch I'm trying to scratch in regard to that. Let me take this thing off. I feel like the gag had kind of run its course anyway, and it was irritating me. And this is about Unique Toys and DX9, who I think, for the most part, make a quality product on both ends, and I think for the most part, we simultaneously see an increase in quality between both companies if we look at their careers. I've done a sit-down Saturday, past, present, and future on Unique Toys. I don't think I've done one on DX9, but that might have to happen now. So there's two parts to this conversation, and I'm not sure which is most appropriate, so I'm just going to go with my gut, which is what I'm doing for the content of this video too, by the way, and start with the two companies. I don't remember exactly how or exactly when or exactly what it was, but for some reason the two have always been linked. I'm pretty sure it had to do with DX9 Splinter, which was their Wreck-Gar that came out initially under the Unique Toys banner. I think it had Unique Toys in the promo pictures, the initial promo pictures of it, or Unique Toys were the ones to initially put out the promo pictures. But DX9 has been attached to it, but it always seemed like it was a subsidiary of Unique Toys. If you look at a lot of reviews on YouTube of this video, mine included, a lot of them say Unique Toys DX9 Splinter. So they've always been tied, and it's because of that figure. At the time, I thought it was them trying to get away from a pre-established reputation regarding their Predaking, which most people wouldn't even consider. But for whatever reason, the two companies have always been linked. They've also always been considered to be the same companies. The questions have come down to what is the point in having both? And there's been numerous theories. One was that one of the companies was their in-house designers and the other company was their contracted designers. I've heard that one. One was that one company was going to focus more on Autobots and one company was going to focus more on Decepticons. I've heard that one. But I'm not sure that any of those are true. What I do understand to be true is that they are one of the third-party companies that owns their own factories. And that's a very big power play in regards to third company. There's only a few companies that have it, it seems, and we could do a sit-down Saturday on that at some point in the future. But it's a huge leg up and it's a huge advantage. And I'm often more forgiving of companies that don't own their own factories than I am of those that are. I'm not sure if that's fair, but I know it's something I do. But recently I've been noticing a trend between the two brands that we believe are under the banner of one company. Unique Toys put out some pretty impressive movie-styled figures, both the Peru Kill that took me by storm. I was amazed at the engineering and build quality of that thing, especially in regard to their previous releases. Their Challenger, of course, which is beautiful, won a number of third-party awards on my channel late last year, or at least was nominated. I'd have to go back and watch. And they have a Megatron coming, and the Megatron, I have no reason to doubt, is of the same caliber, because they've kind of set a reputation with that as well. I've heard all sorts of rumors regarding these, because they do seem like a step up. They do seem on another level than not only what they've done in the past, but what most third parties have done. Some of your favorites even included. But it's rare that anyone addresses either one of these two companies as their personal favorite. And that's because it's been very inconsistent, which may lead back to the contracted designers conversation that we just had earlier. But now DX9 is also doing movie-style Bayverse figures with their La Hire, which I think is their hot rod. All of the Bayverse figures kind of look similar to me. But regardless of that, it's definitely coming and it looks good. And it looks promising and there's no reason to doubt that it won't be a quality product. So now you have two companies creating the same line underneath the same banner. Why split the names? We'll get back to it. What else have the two companies done? Well, Unique Toys did an Abominus, which had a pretty good reputation and for our first combiner effort was a very solid piece. Wasn't perfect, far from it in fact, but the engineering on their blot specifically was fascinating and remains one of my favorites to this day. Now, they followed that up with a Bruticus that is fairly well built, fairly well put together, but I took personal issue with because I felt like I was sold a gang of wolf tickets. As I've discussed at length on this channel, I feel like the first two releases were not indicative of what they ended up doing in the end. By the end, I felt a lot like French Montana when I saw the sculpts in hand and said, they talking about, and fell down a well of disappointment. Now, the Bruticus and the Abominus don't quite scale together. However, they are closer, it seems, than what DX9 is doing with their Stunticon, which is a completely different scale and much more in line with what Zeta and Fans Toys are doing than what Unique Toys has done in the past on any of their three efforts. I don't know if we need to mention the Predaking anymore in this episode. I feel like we'll just let that one go as a first attempt. It was reasonably priced. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So DX9 jumped in late on the combiner train that Unique Toys was already kind of doing with a different scale, and you could argue a different sculpt with the exception of Swindle and Broom. They talking about. So, same company, different brands, same objective, different styles, different sizes. Interesting. On the flip side of that, we saw DX9 start with Legends class figures way ahead of the game. They were far ahead of the curve than most other third-party companies in that regard, with their Leia and Twofold, one of which I greatly enjoyed, the other was kind of a wash to me. But they continued, Hulky, so on and so forth, and they had a lot of momentum behind that push and a lot of quality figures behind that push. And in my opinion, they've really only gotten better in regard to their Legends. And then we saw Unique Toys jump on the Legends train, which had a relatively different feel, definitely a different design and tolerance in materials feel, but very good figures, very well done with their headmasters. They're still some of my favorite Legends I've looked at. So, same company, different brands, different feels, same size. I also feel like the two have been distancing themselves from one another, and I don't know how to describe that, other than for a long time it felt like this unified front between the two companies, and now it kind of seems like the two companies are working very independently of one another. Now, maybe possibility this could be because they're both having success and want to kind of set up their own futures for both lines, for their own brands to have a legacy of their own. And that's respectable and that's definitely possible. I don't know, but it doesn't feel that way to me. What it feels like is distance. And we're not seeing a whole lot from either. There have been other things that have popped up recently. Things that seem very well done and certainly not as though they're the company's first rodeo. Enter Magic Square. Now, I have no evidence to suggest this, but what I do have is a hunch. The Magic Square figures, both in their materials and in their engineering and in their quality, seem very reminiscent to me of the Unique Toys Headmasters. So the immediate question is, am I suggesting that Magic Square and Unique Toys are the same? My answer is kind of. Magic Square, I think, is working very hard on their branding. I see this with the onslaught of Legends figures and with the first Masterpiece scaled attempt with their Optimus Prime. So because of how hard they've been working on the branding of Magic Square, I don't necessarily think they're the same company. However, I think the designer might be. I think that the designer and access to the factory might be the same. That it might either be a third branding under that same banner, or perhaps the two companies are not quite getting along as well as we thought and have started to distance themselves from one another, and this is Unique Toys perhaps expanding their umbrella of figures they could produce. Or there's a third fallout with the designer of Magic Square. And I don't know any of this to be true. I'm just saying it feels right. On the other side of that coin, I do have evidence. And that is DX9 and New Age Toys. New Age Toys is another company that I feel like has a strong reputation, had a strong product for being a first attempt at a figure. The scalings are different, which throws a monkey wrench in my predictions and in my hunches, but something seems familiar about them too. However, there's a lot more evidence here. Earlier this week, I asked for help from the community to get pictures of boxes and instructions of all four companies. And I didn't have a whole lot to suggest that Magic Square and Unique Toys were the same from looking at that evidence. I could nitpick little similarities and such, but I'll tell you what I did have evidence for, and that's DX9 and New Age. Their packaging, the design of their packaging, the fonts that are being used, the rear pictures with diorama setups that almost look like they're taken within the same diorama. The instructions and the manner in which they're produced, laid out, designed, and meant to be interpreted with their use of arrows and colored sequences, as well as the same style and base materials used for their packaging and clamshells, suggest to me that those two companies are definitely, if not the same, 100% connected. Now, if I'm right about any of this, it wouldn't be surprising to me because neither New Age nor Magic Square seem to be fresh attempts. They seem to be like people that knew their way around this stuff, which would make sense. And being as though neither Unique Toys or DX9's reputations ever really took off, I can see how either one could want to rebrand, but I think it's more closely related to trouble behind the scenes from both companies that we're not aware of with them falling apart. Business and friendships and such are so challenging to keep together and congruent. So the truth is that I don't know. I'm suggesting it as a possibility because it seems that way to me. And I'm much more likely to lean towards the idea that the companies are not seeing eye to eye anymore than I am the idea that they're diversifying their brands. Not their bonds like Wu-Tang did, but their brands. It does raise the question of who gets the factory if what I'm saying is true and how that works. Who's ultimately in control of it. And even though Unique Toys was first, I got this feeling it's DX9 that has the factory. But does any of this ultimately matter? No. We're still getting tons of product. We still have now 4 companies creating solid product that we as consumers get to pick and choose from between them in order to fulfill our own needs as a collector or fan. So ultimately it doesn't matter, but I do think it's interesting and I do think it's something that we should all watch. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.